Good day. We are the Group I, and we're about to discuss the round robin scheduling in C programming. So we are the BSIT2A, and the members are Joey Miral, the leader, James Medalla, and John Benedict Deo.
Objective, and I'm the one that will be discuss the objective. The group's main objective of the round robin algorithm is achieve balance between response and utilization. The scheduling mechanism should keep resources of system busy. Next is be predictable by minimizing statistical variance in process response time. A system can guarantee that processes will receive predictable service levels and thus execute the process in C programming. Ma- Manipulate the computation of each processes and print the completion of each process through Gantt chart. Every process can accomplish its goals once they completed the burst time and given time quantum followed by the other process that will be also executed. If a process has still a burst time left, it will continue the execution less than or equal to the given time quantum. For the benefits of others, the objectives are give information to the other student in the future that round robin can also be executed through programming, especially students. Give benefit for the professor so they can use the program and the presentation to the next coming student that will also take courses in operating system in connection with the programming language. And the scope and delimitation will be discussed by Mr. Meral.
So for the scope and the limitations, for this execution entered by the user, the execution is limited in the program. So there will be given a minimum amount of time and a maximum amount of time. So next, so for the process execution, so the process execution is between the minimum of 3 processes and maximum of 10 processes. Tapos, for the burst time, the burst time minimum process will be 1 and the maximum is 10. So for the arrival time will also be equal to greater than or equal to 0 for the minimum time and the maximum of 10. So on the other hand, next, so on the other hand, the completion time, turnaround time, and waiting time will be computed from the input of the user. So the table chart will also print all the processes according, and the program will also print the Gantt chart for each processes executed after the table chart. So the program will be tested through test cases in 4 figures, and each of them have different numbers of processes prepared by the group members. So next. So we will continue for the result and discussion. Next. So for the result and discussion, we give an example with the figure number 3, a scheduling program in C programming. So next. So for the output of the program, the number of processes is 7. So meaning there are 7 processes to be executed. So next one, we enter the process number. We enter the process numbers at 1 with the arrival time of 0 and the burst time of 1. Then process number 2 with the arrival time of 2 and the burst time of 2. And enter the process number 3 and the arrival of time is 3 and the burst time of 2. For the process number 4, the arrival time is 4 and the burst time is 2. For the process number 5, the arrival is number 5 and the burst time is 4. For the process 6, the arrival time is 6 and the burst time is 5. So for the process 7, the arrival time is 7 and the burst time is 8. And to enter the quantum time assigned by the input of the user is 2. Next. So in this part, we will show you the figures, the output of the program, and the graph through Excel. So for this one, as you see in the Gantt chart, the first processes that that was um, the first going to be executed is the P1, which has as a 1 milliseconds. So for this one, it only executes, but the quantum time is 2. So it's okay because it is not greater than 2. So it will execute by 1. So there's no remaining time. So the ready so the burst time will be 0 after the execution of P1. So no remaining processes. So for the process 2, the arrival time is 2 and the burst time is 2. So for the idle is in the P at the arrival time of P1. Arrival time of 1 milliseconds because there are no assigned there are no running process at the 1 millisecond. So it will consider as idle, meaning that there is no execution that will going to be executed. So let's go back to the P2. The P2 has a burst time of 2, and since the quantum time is 2 milliseconds, it will execute 2 milliseconds for the burst time of P2. So there are no remaining milliseconds of the burst time of P2. So it will end at 4. So next is the P3, which has also the burst time of 2 and the arrival time of 3. So for the burst time, it will also executes 2 because it is equal to the burst time of 2. So it will execute the burst into from 4 to 6 milliseconds. So the completion time is 6 because there are no remaining time. And for the process 4 has an arrival time of 4, meaning um, it is after the P3. So the arrival time of P4 is 4 and the burst time is 3. Note that our quantum time is 2, so it will execute at the burst time of 2. So the remaining time of P4 is 1. So it will execute once all the processes are already executed at the quantum time 2. So next is the P5, which has the arrival time of 5 and the burst time of 4. So since P5 has 4 burst time, it will only execute 2 milliseconds based from the quantum time rule. So from 8, it will going to execute until 10. So so after that, there are 2 remaining processes of P5. Next is the P6, which has the arrival time of 6 and the burst time of 5. So since the burst time of P6 is 5 and the quantum time is 2, there the only burst time will execute will be 2 milliseconds. So there are remaining of 3. So next one is process ID at 7, which has the arrival time of 7 and the burst time of 2. So P2 has landed on P has landed on 12 milliseconds, and it will only execute to 2 milliseconds based from the quantum time. And since the burst time of P7 is only 2 milliseconds, there are no remaining time. So all the processes of P1 and P7 are executed, but there are remaining times left from those processes that has remaining time of burst time. So for the next one, we have P4. P4 has a remaining time of 1, so it only execute one process, 1 millisecond. So from 14 to 15. And since there are no remaining time, the completion time of this one, so the completion time of this is only 1. So the completion time will be 15. So for the next one, the P5, which has the remaining burst time will execute 2 milliseconds based from the quantum time. So from 15 to 17. And since there are no remaining time, the completion time will be 17. So for the next one is the P6. The P6 has the remaining time of 3, and since um, the burst time of the remaining burst time of P6 is 3, and it is greater than the quantum time of 2, it will only executes 2 process 2 milliseconds of the process. So it will execute from 17 to 19. So since there are no P7 and there are no remaining time for P7 and the completion time is 14, and the P6 has only one burst time, so the P6 will be the next one to be executed. So P6 has the remaining time of 1, and so it execute only 1 milliseconds. So for the completion time of that will be 20. And for the turnaround time, let us look to the table chart. So for the completion time of P1 is 1. For the P2, the completion time is 4. The P3 with the completion time of 6. P4, completion time of 15. P P5, a completion time of 17. P6 with a completion time of 20. And P7 with a completion time of 14. So for the turnaround time, to get the computation of turnaround time, we're going to identify the difference between the completion time and the arrival time. So for the turnaround time of P1, completion time minus the arrival time will be equal to the P80 of P1 will be 1. For the process 2, completion time at 4 minus arrival time at 2 will be equal to 2 for turnaround time. Same as the other processes. So as the result, the turnaround time of these processes are 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 14, and 7. So for the total of the turnaround time, so the total is 50 milliseconds. So to get the average TAT or the turnaround time, so 50 divided by the number of processes, which is 7, and we get the result of 7.14 ms. Same with the waiting time, but for the waiting time, to get the result of waiting time of every processes, we're going to identify the difference between the turnaround time and the burst time. So for the waiting time of process ID number process ID 1, we're going to subtract the 80 minus burst time to get the 0. Same with other processes. So for the result, 0, 0, 1, 8, 8, 9, and 5. So for the total of waiting time, we get 31 milliseconds. So to get also the average of the waiting time, we will going to divide the 31 ms divided by the number of processes, which is 7. And so we get the 4.43 milliseconds. So let us look to the graph, Excel to really understood the Gantt chart of the program. So going back, going back to the figure number 3 in the Gantt chart, we're going to explain to you the Excel file. So this is the example of the program with the output. So this is the example. So for the process, so the process ID 1, arrival time of 0 and the burst time of 5. P2 with the arrival time of 1 and the burst time of 3. Sheet number 3. Sheet number 3. So for the sheet number 3, so I go repeat the process based from the output of the program. So for the P1, the arrival time is 0 and the burst time of 1. So P2, arrival time of 2 and the burst time of 2. P3, arrival time of 3 and burst time of 2. P4, arrival time of 4 and burst time of 3. 5, arrival time of 5 at 5 and the burst time of 4. 6, P6, arrival time of 6 and the burst time of 5. P7, arrival time of 7 and burst time of 2 with a time quantum of 2 milliseconds. So let us look to the Gantt chart. So P1 landed at arrival time of 0 and execute to 1, only 1 because greater less than or equal to the quantum time. So next, idle. So since idle has no execution, it will not going to execute. But since it arrives from 2 milliseconds, we will say that the P2 will be at the idle. So next one, P2 arrival time of 2 and burst time of 2. Also P3 burst time of 2, so the completion time will be 6. Next is P4 with the arrival time burst time of 3, so the remaining time is 1. So next is P5 with the burst time of 4, so execute only 2 with the remaining of 2. P6 burst time of 5, and it will only execute 2. So remaining time is 3. So next one is 7. 7 with a burst time of 2. So it will only execute 2 milliseconds and no remaining time. For going back to the P4, which has the remaining time of 1, so it only execute 1 milliseconds. Next one is P5 with a burst time of P5 with a burst time of 2, so it only execute 2 milliseconds and landed to 17. So for the next one is the P6, which has a burst time of which has a burst time of 3, and since the 3 is greater than the quantum time, which is 2, it will only execute 2, so it will only land to 19. So for the next one, since there are no remaining time left for other processes and only P6 has the remaining time of 1, so it will only execute 1, so it landed to 20 milliseconds. So completion time will be for from P1 to P7. The completion times are 1, 4, 6, 15, 17, 20, and 14. For the turnaround time, from P1 to P7, the turnaround time are 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 14, and 7 with a total of 50 milliseconds. To get the turnaround time for every processes, we're going to subtract completion time and the arrival time. So for the waiting time, to get the waiting time of every processes, we're going to subtract the turnaround time and the burst time. So as the result of every processes from P1 to P7 of waiting time, the waiting times are 0, 0, 1, 8, 8, 9, and 5 with a total of 31 ms. So to get the average TAT, we're going to get the total of the turnaround time, which is 50, and divide it to the number of processes, which is 7. So 50 divided by 7 will be 7.14 milliseconds. And for the average waiting time, to get the average waiting time, we get the total of the waiting time, which is 31, and divide it into the number of processes, which is 7. So the result will be 4.43 milliseconds. So these are the report of the group I in round robin scheduling algorithm in C programming. So thank you and God bless.